Working on a knife handle, 503 layered Damascus. It's a little vacuum chamber for epoxy casting. Let's see, we gotta so our knife glued down to the board. You can see casting epoxy resin over Damascus. I'm getting ready to cast the other side. See the pins are embedded in the epoxy. We'll clean that up and get this side ready. Casting epoxy, you need a vacuum chamber. I used a piece of 3-inch PVC pipe. I just tapped a 1/4-inch pipe fitting, and I use an air compressor and a vacuum generator. Pull about 15 inches of vacuum. HG. I'll demonstrate that when we vac it. So I got some of this, it's like aluminum foil tape. I think it's made for insulating. And so what I do is I bend a kink in it before I take the paper off. And I take the paper off and I fold it over and stick it to itself. And then where it's seamed is right along the spine of the knife. Okay. And then you wonder why I have this light blaring at us. Well, it's heating up this PVC pipe. So when you pour your casting epoxy, which is just regular, amazing clear cast, works real well, 2-part. It talks about only going 1/4 of an inch or so at a time, and I'm doing just a 1/4 of an inch, but there's gonna be some bubbles in it when you mix it. And in order to get it clear, I don't know if you can see that. In order to get it clear enough with no bubbles, which mine has no bubbles, is after it's mixed in there, I'll place it inside the pipe and I'll put it under vacuum and I'll pull it back out. I'll set it back on the table and I'll take a heat gun, just a typical heat gun, and I'll wave it back and forth across the wet epoxy. And the vacuum pulls the bubbles out of the epoxy that I introduce when I mix it together. And the heat gun will pop the bubbles on the top of the epoxy. Now, it's really slow curing. It takes 24 hours, or this clear cast does. So I put it back into the vacuum chamber. I put the lid on it, and that's my dust-free atmosphere while it sets up, because believe me, there's nothing dust-free in a blacksmith shop. It's just horribly dusty. Anyway, the first side looked good. I hope the second side will look good, and I'll do some more. Okay, John here again. Okay, I said I'd give you a little rundown on the vacuum setup. So it's just a vacuum hose. So this hose is from my air compressor, adjustable regulator. This is a vacuum generator you can pick up on Amazon, and a valve, a vacuum gauge in HG, which is mercury. It's in inches of mercury. And then a silencer. You need a silencer because these are very irritating. And they can also stir up some dust if they're just blowing in your shop. Anyway, we're getting ready to cast the handle. You make sure your vacuum chamber is level. Getting ready to cast the other side of the knife. It's all cleaned up with rubbing alcohol and formed up there. Getting ready to mix the epoxy. Have some rubbing alcohol ready and some Q-tips for cleanup in case you need to. Epoxy, you can see the bubbles in it. That's what the vacuum chamber gets rid of. You want to mix it really well. Okay, we're gonna get everything going here. We're gonna pour the casting epoxy. First thing you do is just pour a little bit to start off with. And what you want to do, you want to roll it around and get it wet everywhere. We'll talk about the vacuum chamber a little bit while we're doing this. Every shop should have a vacuum chamber for stabilizing wood handles. That's an important part of a nice knife. If you put a nice knife handle on a knife and the wood's wet, it will shrink. And if you can stabilize them first, you can buy some cactus juice wood stabilizer. And what I try to do is get that just full, but not overly full. It'll make sure you get the top of the pins. Sometimes for some reason the epoxy will pull back on top of them pins for some reason. And I never fail, I always put in so much it runs over the top. But that's just the way it is. And I mixed up, just for this half of this little handle, about 50 cc's. And I see I have a little bit left. But anyway, so we're gonna stop right there. Okay. I'm gonna shut that off while I put the knife in the vacuum chamber. It needs both hands. Okay, the knife's in there. I'm just gonna tighten this cap up by hand. I don't care if it leaks just a little bit while we're doing this vacuum. Okay, now, so we'll shut the valve, we'll turn up some air pressure. You can hear the silencer. That's about 40 pounds there, maybe 60. Okay, we'll turn it down a bit. Yeah, we'll crack on the vacuum generator. You see it starting to pull vacuum, it's fast. You open the valve, we've got about 15 inches there. We might turn up the air regulator a little bit more and see what we can get. Oh, look at that. Okay. Got about 16 inches of vacuum. Okay, right now inside that vacuum chamber, all the bubbles are coming to the top, and that's really enough. It's really that fast. Okay, shut that off. Sometimes you want to lubricate them threads a little bit, but I don't want to mess with the mess. Okay, you see the knife in there. You can reach in and pull it out carefully. It's still very wet. Okay. Okay, you can see there's bubbles on the top. I don't know, you get over here, we're getting the light right and you can see it. Anyway, put it with the heat gun. You see it shimmer that back and forth. Just chase them bubbles out. Okay, now, let's get down here and get a good look at that. I'm sorry, I can see it probably better than you can. But... So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna stop this and I'm gonna probably add just a little more resin and then put it back in the vacuum chamber. I'm just gonna screw on the cap to keep down the dust while it dries. It's about 10:30 in the AM. I'm not gonna put that too tight. And then that's it for that. One more thing, when you're gonna heat your epoxy to dry, put the good old fiberglass heat blanket over the pipe with the light underneath. I mean, it's 70 in my shop today because I'm doing this, but I really want that about 75 or 80 degrees. So I just leave that light on. There's no chance of fire with that blanket, but I have one of those bulbs that doesn't get super hot anyway. You can touch it, but you don't want to leave your hand on it. Don't put a blanket over it or something flammable. We've got enough flammable stuff out here anyway. So, and that's one thing I want to touch on. If you're doing flammable stuff, don't be welding and sparking. If you're working on your handle and stuff like that, you can see I've got almost everything on that table burns. So I'll take time now to clean all that up and put up everything I was doing with that handle before I do anything else. So, you know, blacksmith shops and welding shops, you gotta be extremely careful. So really, I keep all of my acetone and stuff in cabinets and stuff at the other end of the shop, which probably not even should be in the shop, but the guy's gotta do what he's gotta do.